The rain had been falling since morning, the kind that made everything outside look like a watercolor painting. Inside her cozy suburban home in Portland, Oregon, Clara Benson was rearranging the living room, fresh flowers on the table, soft music in the background, and a gentle warmth spreading from the fireplace. It wasn't a special occasion, but she wanted everything to feel welcoming. Her nephew Ethan was coming to stay for a few days. He had recently graduated from college and was looking for work in the city. Clara had offered her guest room without hesitation. After all, she hadn't seen him properly since he was a teenager, but what she didn't expect was how much things had changed. When the doorbell rang, Clara brushed her hair back and smiled. She opened the door and froze for a second. Ethan stood there, rain dripping from his jacket, a suitcase by his side. He wasn't the lanky boy she remembered. He was tall now, confident, with a warm smile and eyes that carried something gentle but unreadable. "Aunt Clara," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "It's so good to see you." Clara stepped aside quickly, hiding her sudden nerves. "Oh, Ethan, come in. You must be freezing." He walked in, shaking off the rain. The scent of his cologne, a faint mix of cedar and something crisp, filled the room. It was strange, she thought, how time could change someone so completely. The boy she used to make pancakes for now looked like someone who could stand on his own, someone the world would take seriously. As they sat in the living room with hot cocoa, their conversation flowed easily. At first, stories about college, job interviews, his plans for the future. But underneath the laughter, there was a quiet awareness between them. Ethan looked at her with a kind of respect and affection that felt new. "You haven't changed much," he said suddenly. Clara laughed softly. "I think that's your polite way of saying I'm getting old." "No," he said, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than expected. "I meant it. You still have that same warmth, the same way you used to make everything feel safe." His words hit deeper than she wanted to admit. For years, Clara had been living alone after her divorce. She had learned to enjoy the peace, but sometimes the silence in her house felt too heavy. Now, with Ethan here, it was as if life had color again. That night, after dinner, they sat near the fireplace, watching the flames dance. Ethan talked about his struggles, how uncertain everything felt after graduation, how he missed the simplicity of home. Clara listened, her heart softening with every word. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need," she said, "until you find your footing." Ethan looked at her, his eyes glimmering in the firelight. "Thank you, Aunt Clara. I don't think you realize how much that means to me." She smiled, but her heart felt oddly unsteady. Something about the way he looked at her, so sincere, so grateful, stirred emotions she hadn't expected to feel. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. It was something deeper, a connection that felt fragile, meaningful, and dangerous to question. As the night grew quiet, Ethan stood and said, "I'll head to bed. Long drive, you know." Clara nodded. "Good night, Ethan." He paused at the stairs, glanced back at her, and said softly, "Good night, Clara." The way he said her name, not Aunt, just Clara, sent a flicker of warmth through her chest. After he disappeared upstairs, she sat there, staring at the fading fire, wondering why her heart was racing. The house, once too quiet, now felt alive again. Later that night, when Clara walked past the guest room, she noticed the door slightly open. The soft light from inside spilled into the hallway. She thought about checking if he was comfortable, maybe offering an extra blanket, but she stopped herself. Instead, she whispered to the empty air, "He's just staying for a few days. Don't overthink it." Yet, deep down, she already knew something had shifted. Ethan wasn't the same boy who used to leave cereal boxes open on her counter. He was different now, thoughtful, grounded, and somehow, being near him made her remember parts of herself she thought she'd forgotten. The next morning would bring new conversations, gentle smiles, and moments she wouldn't know how to explain. And before the week was over, Clara would realize that inviting her nephew to stay over wasn't just an act of kindness, it was the beginning of something that would change both their hearts forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, spilling gold across the hardwood floor. Clara woke to the sound of laughter, Ethan's voice. It came from the kitchen, warm and steady, as if it belonged there. She slipped on her robe and walked down, her heart strangely light. There he was, standing by the counter in a gray t-shirt, flipping pancakes like it was the most natural thing in the world. The radio hummed softly in the background, and the smell of coffee filled the air. "Good morning," she said, smiling. He turned, his eyes lighting up. "Morning. I hope you don't mind. I raided your fridge. Thought I'd return the favor for all those breakfasts you made me when I was a kid." Clara laughed, watching him. "So, You remember that? How could I forget? You used to make those little smiley face pancakes. You said they'd bring good luck before school. I might have made that up, she teased. He grinned. Still worked. Though, I always felt braver after breakfast here. Something about that sentence made her chest tighten. Maybe it was the way he said here, like her home had always been a safe place for him. She hadn't realized how much that meant until now. They sat together, sharing pancakes and stories. Ethan talked about his dreams, working in architecture, traveling, maybe even designing homes that felt like stories themselves. Clara listened, fascinated. She had once dreamed of painting, but life had steered her elsewhere. Marriage, bills, routines, the quiet heartbreak of things left undone. You ever think about what you wanted to do when you were younger? Ethan asked gently. She smiled faintly. All the time. I used to paint sunsets, but somewhere along the line, I stopped. Life got busy. He looked at her, thoughtful. Then maybe you should start again. The simplicity of that suggestion caught her off guard. Start again, as if it were that easy. And yet, when he said it, it didn't sound impossible, it sounded like an invitation. The day passed softly, like time itself was moving slower. They went for a walk around the neighborhood, the crisp autumn air carrying the smell of rain and pine. Clara noticed how people smiled at them, an older woman and a young man. Laughing, talking, like family. But inside, she felt a quiet confusion. It wasn't about romance, not really. It was something gentler, admiration, gratitude. The strange beauty of being seen by someone after years of invisibility. Later that evening, Ethan found an old photo album on the bookshelf. They sat together flipping through pictures, her wedding, his childhood, summers at the lake. You look so happy here, he said, pointing to a photo of her and her late ex-husband. Clara's smile dimmed. We were. For a while, but sometimes, love changes, and people drift apart. He looked at her quietly, then said, I'm sorry. You deserve someone who stays. The words lingered. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled, touched by the sincerity in his tone. As the night deepened, thunder rolled in the distance, and rain began again. They sat by the window, watching the drops slide down the glass. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of rain. I missed this, Ethan said suddenly. Being around you, it feels steady. Like home. Her heart warmed. You can stay as long as you want, Ethan. There's no rush. He turned toward her, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the lamp. You really mean that? Of course, she said, smiling. Family always has a place here. He nodded, but there was something in his expression, something deep and unspoken, a thought he didn't voice. When Clara went to bed that night, she lay awake listening to the rain. There was peace in having someone in the house again, but also a strange restlessness she couldn't name. She told herself it was just comfort. The warmth of company after years of solitude. But when she closed her eyes, she kept seeing his smile, hearing his voice, saying, you deserve someone who stays. And she wondered, not for the first time, if life was giving her a second chance at something she hadn't even known she'd been missing. The next few days passed like pages in a slow, beautiful book. Clara couldn't remember the last time her house had felt so alive. The sound of footsteps on the stairs, laughter echoing from the kitchen, the faint hum of music from the guest room, it all made the quiet corners of her home breathe again. Ethan brought a kind of energy that softened the edges of her loneliness. He helped fix the squeaky cabinet doors, trimmed the backyard plants, and even set up her old record player that hadn't worked in years. When the needle dropped and the soft crackle of an old jazz tune filled the air, Clara felt something in her chest open, something that had been quietly asleep. One afternoon, while the rain paused and sunlight returned, Ethan found her standing in the living room, staring at a blank canvas she'd set up on a whim. He smiled. So you actually took my advice? Clara laughed nervously. I didn't say I'd paint anything. I just thought I'd try. Trying counts, he said, stepping closer. What are you going to paint? She looked at the window, where golden light fell across the room. Maybe the light, she murmured. It's beautiful today. He watched her carefully, the admiration in his eyes quiet but unmistakable. It's beautiful because of how you see it. Clara felt her breath catch for a moment. There was something in the way he said things, so simple, yet so full of meaning. She quickly looked back at the canvas, brushing it off with a soft smile. You always were good with words. He shrugged, grinning. I learned from you. You used to write me letters when I was a kid. You made even grocery lists sound poetic. That made her laugh, genuinely laugh on. The sound filled the house like sunlight. Over the next few evenings, They settled into an easy rhythm. They cooked together, played board games, shared stories from their lives. But beneath the laughter, Clara noticed moments of quiet, those brief, lingering silences where their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. One night, as they were washing dishes, Ethan said softly, "You know, I used to think growing up meant moving away from the people who made you feel safe. But now I'm not so sure." Clara looked at him, her hands still in the warm water. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Maybe it's not about leaving. Maybe it's about finding your way back to the things that always mattered." She didn't know how to respond. The room suddenly felt warmer, smaller, filled with something delicate and real. That night, when she was closing the curtains, she saw Ethan outside on the porch, looking at the stars. His expression was calm, thoughtful. For a moment, she considered going out to join him, but something held her back. Instead, she watched quietly from behind the glass, wondering what he was thinking. Was he happy here? Did he feel the same comfort she did? Or was this just a brief pause in his busy life, a quiet intermission before the real world called him away again? The next morning, Clara found a small sketchbook on the dining table. Inside was a pencil drawing of her sitting near the fireplace, painting. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of warmth, every line drawn with care. At the bottom, he'd written, "You bring color to quiet places." Her eyes softened as she closed the book, her heart fluttering with a strange mix of gratitude and emotion she didn't quite understand. Later, when Ethan came downstairs, she held up the sketchbook and smiled. "You drew this?" He looked embarrassed. "Yeah, I didn't mean for you to see it yet." "It's beautiful," she said softly. "You have real talent." Ethan, he met her gaze, his voice low. "You inspire me." The moment stretched too long, too tender. Then the phone rang, breaking the spell. Clara quickly turned away to answer it, her voice slightly shaky. It was her friend, Linda, inviting her to a small art exhibition that weekend. Clara almost said no out of habit, but then she glanced at Ethan. "Actually, I think I will," she said. "Maybe it's time I go out again." When she hung up, Ethan smiled. "Can I come with you?" Her heart warmed. "I'd like that." As the week drew closer to the exhibition, Clara couldn't help but feel the undercurrent between them growing stronger, not in words or actions, but in the way they noticed each other. A glance, a smile, the ease of silence that didn't need filling. She told herself it was just connection to people, finding comfort in kindness, in family, in shared time. But part of her knew there was something deeper, something neither of them had named. And as Saturday approached, Clara had no idea that the art exhibition would change everything, revealing feelings neither of them expected to face. Saturday came with a cool breeze and a sky brushed in soft shades of gray and gold. Clara stood before her mirror, feeling oddly nervous. It had been years since she'd gone to an event like this. She smoothed her navy blue dress, simple yet elegant, and took a deep breath. Ethan appeared at the door, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark jeans. He paused, and for a second, his expression softened. "You look beautiful, Aunt Clara." She smiled, her cheeks warming. "Thank you, Ethan. You clean up nicely yourself." They laughed, breaking the brief tension that had filled the space between them. Then they headed out together, the drive quiet but comfortable, music playing low on the radio. The exhibition was held in a small local gallery downtown. Warm lights, gentle music, the faint scent of paint and polished wood. Artists and visitors moved about, talking softly, admiring the artwork on display. Clara felt her heart race as she stepped inside. It reminded her of the dreams she once had, the ones she'd tucked away for years. Ethan noticed her hesitation and offered his arm. "Come on, you belong here." Those words struck her deeply. She smiled, letting him guide her through the crowd. They stopped before a painting of an ocean at dusk, waves caught in motion, light dancing on water. "That one feels alive," Clara whispered. Ethan nodded. "It reminds me of you." She turned to him, surprised. "Of me?" "Yeah," he said softly. "You've been through storms, but somehow, you still reflect light." For a moment, the noise around them faded. Clara couldn't find words, only warmth rising in her chest. It wasn't romance, not in the way people might think. It was admiration, connection, a kind of soul-level understanding that made her heart ache in the best way. As they moved to another corner, Clara noticed a familiar face, her old friend, Linda, the one who had invited her. "Clara," Linda called, waving. "You made it?" Clara smiled. "I did. It's beautiful here." Linda's eyes shifted to Ethan. "And who's this handsome young man?" Ethan extended his hand politely. "Ethan, Clara's nephew." Linda grinned. "Ah, I see. Well, you two look lovely together." Enjoy the evening. As Linda walked away, Clara felt a faint flush on her cheeks. Ethan laughed softly. You okay? She just assumes things, Clara said quickly, trying to brush it off. Ethan tilted his head, amused. Things? She shot him a playful glare. Don't start. The tension broke, and they both laughed. Yet later that night, as the lights dimmed slightly, and a soft melody played from a corner musician, something changed. Ethan leaned closer, his voice barely above the music. You know, I've been thinking. About what? Clara asked, her heart beating faster. About how easy it feels to be around you, he said honestly. You don't expect me to have it all figured out. You just listen. No one does that anymore. She looked at him, her throat tight. You remind me what it's like to be seen. I guess we're both giving each other something we needed. He smiled gently. Maybe that's why this feels different. The words hung between them, delicate as glass. Before Clara could respond, a woman nearby called out, recognizing Ethan, apparently a fellow graduate from his university. They talked for a few minutes, laughing and catching up. Clara watched, realizing how much she'd grown to care for him, not just as family, but as someone who made her remember who she used to be. Later, as they drove home, the city lights flickered against the windshield. The air between them felt heavier, filled with everything they hadn't said. Clara, Ethan said quietly, eyes on the road. Thank you for tonight, for everything. You have no idea what this time means to me. She looked at him, her voice soft. I could say the same, Ethan. When they reached home, they lingered at the doorway. Neither wanted the night to end. Good night, she said gently. Good night, he replied. But his tone carried something else, something deeper. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. Her heart was restless. The memory of his words, his kindness, his eyes, everything lingered like the echo of a song. She told herself it was harmless, that love could exist in many forms. But in her heart, she felt something shifting quietly, slowly, like dawn breaking over water, and what she didn't know was that Ethan was awake too, sitting in his room, staring at the same stars through the window, wondering if she felt it too. Sunday morning arrived soft and quiet, sunlight spilling gently through the curtains. The house smelled of fresh coffee and maple syrup. Clara was already in the kitchen, humming faintly as she made breakfast. Her hands moved on autopilot, but her mind wasn't calm. It was circling back to last night. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, his words, his eyes, that feeling she'd had standing beside him in the gallery. Something had shifted, something real, and it scared her as much as it moved her. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his hair slightly messy, a sleepy smile on his face. Morning, Clara. Morning, she said, keeping her tone light. You slept late. He grinned. Guess the art wore me out. She chuckled, passing him a plate. Here, sit. I made your favorite blueberry pancakes. He took a bite, eyes brightening. You remember that. Of course, she said softly. Some things you don't forget. They ate quietly for a moment. The morning light glowed around them, and for the first time, silence felt both comfortable and complicated. After breakfast, Ethan helped her clean up, and then they sat outside on the porch. The world felt still, the leaves turning orange and gold around them. Clara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. You ever think about starting over? She smiled faintly. Starting over? I think about it more than I admit. Then why don't you? He asked gently. Clara looked toward the distant trees. Because starting over means believing you still deserve something new. And that's hard when life has already given and taken so much. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice low. You do deserve something new. You deserve peace. Happiness. She turned to look at him, and for a moment, time stilled. The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, it reached a place deep inside her that had been untouched for years. She swallowed softly. You have such a kind heart, Ethan. Your parents did a good job raising you. He smiled faintly. It wasn't just them. I learned a lot from watching you, too. Her breath caught. He looked away then, as if afraid to say more. The air between them felt charged, not romantic in the obvious sense, but tender, meaningful, filled with things both of them were afraid to name. Later that day, Ethan offered to help her clean the attic. It had been untouched for years, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. Dust floated in the sunlight as they pulled down photo albums, travel souvenirs, and faded paintings from her younger days. Ethan lifted one of the canvases. A half-finished painting of a seaside sunset. Did you paint this? Clara nodded. A long time ago. Before life got busy. It's beautiful, he said, studying it closely. You really have a gift. She smiled, a touch of nostalgia in her eyes. I used to think art could save me. Maybe it still can. He set the painting aside and looked at her seriously. Then don't stop. Promise me you'll keep painting. There was such earnestness in his voice that she could only nod. Okay, I promise. When they finished sorting the attic, they found an old box labeled letters. Inside were dozens of envelopes, her correspondence from years ago. One, however, caught Ethan's eye. An old letter she'd written to herself after her divorce. He read the first line quietly. Dear Clara, one day you'll smile again without pretending. She froze for a moment, then took it gently from his hand. I wrote that after my husband left. I was trying to remind myself that pain wasn't permanent. Ethan's voice softened. You did smile again. I see it every day. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't look away. You helped me remember how. The moment stretched quiet, powerful, full of emotion neither of them had planned to feel, but just as the silence deepened, a car horn outside startled them. Clara blinked, stepping back, her heart racing. I should make dinner, she said quickly, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan nodded, though his eyes stayed on her. Yeah, sure. That evening, they ate in near silence. The air felt different, now heavier. Filled with awareness, neither could escape. After dinner, Clara stood by the window, staring at the fading light. She could see Ethan's reflection behind her, the faint outline of his face in the glass. He spoke softly. Clara, I don't want to make things complicated, but these last few days they've meant something to me. She turned, her heart in her throat. Ethan, he stopped her with a gentle shake of his head. I know it's not simple. I just needed to say it. Her voice was barely a whisper. You've brought light back into my life, Ethan, but maybe that's all it needs, to be a reminder that I can still feel alive. He nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion. Then I'm glad I came. They stood there, both silent, the night pressing softly around them. Neither of them noticed the calendar on the wall, the date circled in red. Tomorrow was the day Ethan had to leave for his job interview in Seattle, and neither of them was ready for goodbye. Morning came quietly, wrapped in pale sunlight and the faint hum of rain. The house felt different, still warm, but heavy with the kind of silence that comes before a farewell. Clara stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the mist rising from the garden. The coffee pot hissed softly behind her, but she wasn't really listening. Her thoughts were all on him. Ethan, he was leaving that afternoon for Seattle, a job interview that could change his life, something he'd worked toward for years. She was proud, more proud than she could say, but her heart felt like it was slowly folding in on itself. When Ethan came downstairs with his suitcase, she tried to smile. You're all set? Yeah, he said softly, his voice careful. Everything's packed. Good, she said, forcing brightness she didn't feel. It's a big opportunity. You'll do great. He looked at her for a long moment. I wouldn't have even gotten this far without you, Clara. She shook her head. Don't say that. You did this? You're the one who worked hard. Maybe, he said gently, but you reminded me why it mattered. You gave me space to breathe again, to think. Clara looked down at her hands, her voice soft. You gave me that too. They shared breakfast, mostly in silence. The air between them was thick with everything unsaid: gratitude, affection, longing, confusion. Every time their eyes met, one of them looked away first. When it was time to leave, Clara followed him to the door. The rain had eased into a drizzle, and the air smelled like pine and wet earth. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that could hold all the feelings she couldn't put into words, but nothing came. Ethan turned, his eyes full of emotion. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. Clara smiled gently. Just promise me one thing. Anything, he said. Don't stop believing you deserve good things, no matter how hard life gets. He hesitated, then nodded. Only if you promise the same. She laughed softly, her voice trembling. I'll try. He opened his arms, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. Then she stepped into the hug. It wasn't just a goodbye, it was everything they hadn't said. Comfort, warmth, care. The kind of closeness that didn't need explaining when they finally pulled apart. Ethan brushed a raindrop from her cheek and whispered, Take care of yourself, Clara. You too, Ethan, she said quietly. Then he was gone, walking down the steps, his figure fading into the gray morning. She stood there long after his car disappeared. The sound of rain, the only thing left. The house felt emptier than before, but not the same kind of empty. This time, it wasn't loneliness. It was the ache of something meaningful that had passed through her life and left her changed. Days turned into weeks. Clara returned to painting every day at first, Then whenever the mood struck, she filled her home with color again. Each brushstroke carried traces of memory, the warmth of shared laughter, the comfort of being seen. One evening, a letter arrived from Seattle. The envelope had Ethan's name on it. Inside was a short note. Clara, I got the job. The city feels different, but I'm finding my rhythm. I keep thinking about your words about believing in good things. You were right. I hope you're painting again. And if you ever have another exhibition in Portland, promise you'll invite me. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you for reminding me what home feels like. Clara read the letter twice before setting it on her desk. Then she went to her easel, where a new canvas waited. She began to paint not sadness, not longing, but light, soft, steady light breaking through clouds. Because that's what Ethan had given her, not romance, not regret, but renewal, a reminder that connection, in all its forms, can heal what time once broke. Months later, at a small local gallery, Clara stood before her finished painting titled The Morning After the Rain. And when someone asked her what inspired it, she smiled and said simply, someone who helped me remember that life still has color. And though Ethan was miles away, somehow, she knew he'd understand. The end.